My name's Stephen Ballard with RCN Capital, and we're here with Charles as well from 1892 Capital. And we're going to talk a little bit about what our experience has been like working with brokers in the mortgage lending space, specifically investment property lending, which is kind of cool because we approach it from almost two completely different angles, but we want to show it because the way that we've laid out our business and the way that we operate is entirely dependent on what our brokers are looking for from us and the way that we can kind of serve them. So hopefully you guys have heard of RCN. If not, we do financing for real estate investors across the country, fix and flip, ground up construction, long-term rental, all that kind of stuff. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But more importantly, I'm joined by Charles. Charles, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, my name is Charles Farnsworth. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to having this conversation. I think Stephen's perspective that we come from completely two different sides of the spectrum is absolutely correct. We're a family office. We use all of our own private capital. That allows us the opportunity to underwrite very flexibly. We also focus on fix and flips, new construction, bridge loans. We do all different types of loans at the same time, but we're more flexible in regards to how we underwrite. So I'm looking forward to having this discussion to talk about the differences that we may have with RCN Capital.
Yeah, so it's really the transition I'm looking for, which is how this kind of conversation kind of started is we were talking back and forth a little bit. We realized that we really do approach the way that we underwrite and the way that we try to serve brokers, which is for both of us is kind of our ideal client that we're talking to. We really do approach that completely different. So from you guys, and correct me and kind of expand as you feel necessary, it is very much more of a tailored approach, which is, hey, let me know the deal that you're talking to, and let's sit down and try to figure out how we can make it work or what it would take to make it work. What can we make it look like, right? Absolutely. Can you walk through that process just a little bit for us?
Yeah. Being that we're more, I would consider, as you know, private lending is a big spectrum now, right? And there's soft money, there's institutional money, we fall back into the line of camp of pure hard money. We're more collateral based. Our objective is really to try to fill credit gaps. So we're constantly adapting. We're looking for where the needs are as credit is continually shifting in this market, as rates have gone up. Everybody's portfolios are shifting, their asset classes are shifting. And so we're often looking for that space. We're very flat in our organization, but we also don't have a very clear underwriting box. We have our typical guidelines that we don't want our loan to values, but when it comes to cash reserves, interest reserves, different types of collateral, we can do cross collateral. We can adapt to whatever the client's needs are. They may not fit into other lenders' boxes.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But the challenge of that is that it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of like in-depth conversations. And so it's the benefit is that it's not just a repeatable process, but also the negative is that it's not just a repeatable process, right? And so Absolutely. I'm sure you run into a bit of a learning curve with the brokers you work with, right? As they kind of get used to the way that you guys operate and what you're looking for.
Absolutely, especially when when we work with brokers, there is a educational period that's required because I can't exactly tell them. A lot of them want to tell me, give me a matrix, give me a box, tell me what you fit in, because they have a system of A, B, C, D, E, F credit, and they bring their deals in, they cipher through their system, and it comes out to contact certain lenders based on that criteria. And we fall into all of them in different ways, right? So I think I spend more time actually contacting brokers to check in with them, see what they're doing, because for them, they're looking for a certain degree of consistency that they can put something, know it's going to close and do it anytime. So my tickler to them is if it doesn't fit in maybe any of those, or you're really trying, then essentially give me a call, because that's when we can potentially make it work.
Yeah, and that was one of the synergies that we noticed in our first conversation was we are the opposite. We are trying to make it as repeatable and predictable as possible. Now, we're not always 100% successful, and that's okay, right? But that's the goal we're kind of holding ourselves to. We want someone to be able to reach out to us and say, hey, I have this exact deal, and I've done 3 more like this over the last couple months. Can you guys do it the same way that we did the last 3, right? And that is what we are shooting out for. And so when we run into someone who's like, hey, this one's a little different than the last 3, what they mean by that is this one's extremely difficult and there's 15 moving pieces that we've never had before. That's where it's helpful as a broker to have someone else you can kick that to. So if you've got something where it doesn't fit in the tight boxes of your lenders that you go to for extreme consistency, you want someone who can help you structure. Now, some of your clients are going to be doing consistent cookie cutter projects over and over and over again. But a lot of investors will switch up, and based on what property they can find right now will dictate their strategy. So they don't just always go for the 3-bed, 2-bath in between 250 and 275. They don't have that luxury like they might have 5 or 6 years ago when inventory was wide open enough where they could only pick exactly what their perfect scenario, right? Whereas now that we have half or even a third of the inventory that we had a few years ago, people are having to kind of choose things that are even a little bit more outside of their own comfort zone as investors. And so consistent doesn't always work perfectly. And so you want something that has much more flexibility. So you have a lender, you as the broker and the investor who are all saying like, okay, this is a different deal, a different situation that I'm used to. And so there's a lot of kind of negotiation and give and take into what works, what do we have flexibility with for making an offer of a style of project that you're not as comfortable with or familiar with. And that's where I'm sure a lot of the education and a lot of the interaction between you and the broker and the investor kind of all coming together as a 3-person unit to try to figure out what's their best path forward, right?
Absolutely. I think what RCN does is really critical too. I mean, what you guys do, I mean, I've been on the other side of the fence. I started as a business fixing and flipping homes, and there's nothing more that I want to know that if I brought a deal a certain way, in a certain way, that it's going to happen. And if you spend a lot of effort trying to lock that deal up, and last thing you do is call somebody who goes, well, maybe I can do it based on these circumstances. And that's not, when you're out looking for things, that's not what you're looking for, right? You want somebody that, if I bring it this way, I know you're going to do it, right? And so I think what you guys do is very, very important. And that didn't, go back 6, 7 years ago, that those lenders didn't exist, right? And so, I mean, you guys fill a very important role what's going on right now, and what's caused that. We were back then at doing the same stuff, but we realized that that's when we started going a different direction. Like, let's let them do what they do well, right? They use technology. They tap into the opportunity to securitize these loans. They're creating this product and efficient system that works for a vast majority of investors that are flipping homes. And we'll kind of find the gaps that don't quite fit, and we'll try to navigate those, right? But yeah, your business is built on efficiency, technology, delivery, and ours is based on adaptability and looking and crafting along the way. So it is very interesting. It's different.
Yeah, and it's a cool example of the reason why so much of this is happening in our industry is because 20 years ago, this industry didn't exist on the same level it does today, right?
Not even remotely close.
2010, 2011, 2012, you had to have people that were not related to this industry or were in it in a much smaller way that had to suddenly expand to fill this massive need because investors had tons of properties available, tons of inventory, a surprising amount of liquidity as kind of slowly became available, and had tons of opportunity, tons of properties that they could have purchased, but very little liquidity that they would have access to, that they could get to consistently, right? And so in real time in the last 10, 15 years, you're seeing not just financing entities like the two of us step in to say, yes, we help investors, but also starting to niche down even more to, we help investors with this specific. And so it might be, we help investors with consistency of financing offers. We help investors finding the perfect financing structure for them. We help investors customize financing to what they're looking for. And you see all of that play out in different ways. obviously there's positives and negatives to all of them. Like you were talking about earlier, the institutional money that wants to get into real estate investing more and more is looking for the consistency that they have in other asset types. And so you're kind of forced to do that to be able to deploy that money into the space. And it has its benefits, and you can do things, you can scale a lot easier, both for lenders, brokers, and investors, but you do lose some flexibility. And in doing that, you do have to, where 10 years ago, as a broker, you might have had to be able to have one hard money lender that just did everything for you. And if he said no, you're like, well, I'm not going to do it. Right. Now, and especially in the last 5 years or so, people are really having to diversify. And this is something where in 2017, 18, and 19, I would tell people, hey, you really should find one lender that you send virtually everything to. I was wrong, and I'm okay admitting that. Now you should find multiple lenders that you like to work with, and you should have a very good idea of at what point do they help your clients and what exact problem they help your clients with. Because weirdly, even though you and I both provide financing to real estate investors, we really don't solve the same problem.
Not at all. I think now is a good time to be a broker. I mean, this capital things we're looking nicely siloed until the interest rate went up, over 100%. Things really kind of got broken up into little pieces, and everybody spread out and looked for different places. And so I think brokers have a real opportunity right now. And so back to your statement, yeah, you want a good, quiver of different types of lenders to deliver to your client base, and they're all over the. I mean, you're seeing a lot of preferred debt and equity and mezzanine financing now sort of come into play. You're seeing a lot of bridge money now come into play to try to fill the regional lenders gap for the banks. They might be 1 percentage point higher or 1.5 higher and charge 1 point, but they'll get it done, right? And those didn't really exist. And so now hard money rates used to be, at least when I was first doing it, 24%. Now it can be as low as 12 annualized yield with rate and points. So the space is fast. It's a fascinating time to be in this business right now. And anybody who thinks, my wife used to say she thought finance was boring until she hears about the things I do. It's really a lot of financial engineering and understanding how all these different engines work and what's the best thing for the client, because it's constantly shifting.
Yeah, that's something that I kind of, on that last point that you brought up, of this is a space that is constantly shifting, and we need to be focused primarily on what's best for the client. And that is a leap where all of the brokers that we work with that do a lot of volume and have really high client success rates, that is their focus. And they will tell us, like, that's not what's best for my client, right? They could have closed 10 loans with us the previous month, and they come to us and they're like, that's not what's best for my client. And that focus is perfect. That's what you want as a broker, right? You want to be the client advocate. In order to do that, though, the struggle is you have to know what your client wants. You have to know what they actually need. You have to know what their problems are, and ideally even better than they do themselves. So when you're talking to your clients, you want to try to figure out, are they looking for consistency? Is this a weird deal for them or another Tuesday for them, right? Is this their first ever deal, and so they're going to need a lot more hand-holding and walking through? Have they done 100 of these? In that case, they're going to send you pretty much the exact document package that most lenders need, and they're going to say, what would this look like and how fast can we close, right? And adjusting to that based on either the client that you're working with that day, or more ideally, the kind of client you want to work with consistently, right? And that's a piece that kind of came up as both of us were talking. We have started to niche down a lot as lenders. And I think the next stage that a lot of people as brokers that are kind of struggling to get to is figuring out how to niche down more in the real estate investors that they help, right? Because I'm sure you have this conversation all the time. I know I do, where I'm like, hey, who are you looking to help? What's your ideal client look like? And they're like, a real estate investor. Like, give me something more than that, right? Give me a location, give me a project type, a dollar range,
Oh, yeah.
right? All of it. One of the
Yeah, I mean,
questions go ahead.
the space is, I see funnels when all this happens, right? So if I were a broker, I'd try to be breaking my clients into those spaces, just like you're saying, right? You have fix and flip, 1 to 4 ground up construction, DSCR, they fall into this category of lenders that fall in here. You got bridge loans, value add, multifamily, new construction, that falls into another sliver. You have stabilized, need to renew, got an issue with their existing bank, may need to bring this back. That falls into their sliver. There's all, and each one requires a general a pretty strong understanding of what that lender needs, right? And how that deal needs to look in order for somebody to look at it. And as a broker, trying to do it all, I think I've even thought about, could I deliver that service overall as a broker? And I don't know if I could. I think it'd be very difficult. You need to have specialists in each vein now, based on how many lenders there are and how unique these deals are and how these deals are coming in on all different angles and under different stages now. So it's a challenging place to be for a broker. I think choosing that helps dictate all the lenders that you'll work with, that you can sort of steer your clients to, but it's hard to just choose a lane in this business,
Yeah, that's I've seen that both with a lot of our brokers, where in 2018, 2019, I saw the vast majority were trying to do fix and flip and long-term rental loans at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas now I feel like most of the brokers we work with, they're either 80% of their business is fix and flip or 80% of it is long-term rental. Some of them, it's a large chunk of it's ground up construction. And I also am seeing that with our own sales team. Like, yes, we know our own programs well, but we have almost 40 salespeople now, and we definitely have experts in individual programs, right? And that's like, we live and breathe this every day. This is what we do all the time. And we still have people that are very good at long-term rental, very good at ground up construction. And to match that level of experience, to match that level of knowledge as a broker, if you're working with multiple lenders, is very hard to do or impossible, right? So one of the things that we try to push for, and I know you guys are similar, and we'll get to that in a second, is to encourage brokers to lean on us, right? Which is, yes, you do need to know the high level stuff. You do need to know the basics. You do need to know enough about how to have this conversation well. But when we're in cases where we want to do as much as possible, as consistently as possible, every deal has deviations. So when those deviations come up, when the problems come up, you need to have someone who can go and kind of navigate this. And for a lot of our deals, that tends to be our team. We don't try to teach our brokers, here's how to navigate the problems that come up. Leave that to us. We'll help you kind of communicate that. I'm sure you guys run into that even more than we do, because the loan itself, and the situation itself, is so tailored, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have clients who send me these big, I've been on all sides of this business, right? So I understand from a broker's perspective what they're struggling with. And I just want them to call me, just high level. Let's talk about the deal and make myself available. Let me just ask a handful of critical questions. And if it looks, and I can give you an idea if it's like something we're interested in doing. At that point, I ask you for all this data that I'll sift through and be sure everything works out fine. But yeah, part of serving our brokers is you want to make it as easy for them as possible. Their job is to go out and get the clients, right? I mean, and be a good advocate for them and deliver them to the right place. So the sooner I can give them a general idea of what we can do, the sooner I can give help to them.
Yeah, I can remember a few years back, we had a lot more of our successful brokers that were heavily focused on knowing our products as deeply as we know them. And that worked when we had, just fix and flip and just long-term rental. And they're like, okay, it'll take me 6 months, but I'll get caught up, right? now that the industry has changed a lot, and especially with interest rates changing regularly, the amount of liquidity in the or money in the industry is changing regularly as to whether new investors are joining the space, leaving the space, appetites are changing for what they want to purchase and what they want to lend on. That becomes an extremely difficult thing compared to what it was like in 2018, where you're like, oh, I mean, the worst case scenario is that my numbers will change because in 1 to 2 months, the situation will get better rather than worse. Like that's what 2018, 2019 was like, right? So a lot of people said, yeah, well, let's memorize the guidelines. And now that process is shifting. And I know a lot of what we struggle with now is actually trying to help people with, hey, we've got you once you've got a deal. I need you to go and nail down the market, right? And that becomes even more important when we're talking about niching down to what kind of real estate investor do you want to help? Where do you want them to focus? Where do you want to operate? How do you want to help? How do you want to talk to them? How do you want to find them in the first place? Those have started to become the complicated questions as lenders like ourselves and others have gotten better at actually solving the niche down problems. And so you can say, hey, I love working with 1892. And so I'm going to try to find as many people that have deals that need more creative. So I'm looking for investors that don't stick themselves in boxes and will come and say, they'll look at a bunch of different markets. They'll look at a bunch of different deal types and they'll say, the data is going to tell me what's a good deal and a bad deal, and not just I've done this 50 times before, right? So with all of that, do you guys find yourself giving marketing, I hate to use the word advice, but giving marketing advice to a lot of the brokers you talk to, or do you get a lot of questions about that?
Yeah, when it comes to helping brokers market, I'm fortunate that most of my brokers are a little bit more experienced. I think I generally attract those types of brokers because they already have recognized based on years of experience that they have a deal that's going to be difficult. Their existing lender base is, for whatever reason, they know it's going to be a problem. So they go out and they look for a lender like me. So I'll have brokers, secondary market capital advisors calling me, hey, what do you guys do? Give me an idea. When we have a deal, we'll send it your way. And that generally prompts what I call the experimental deals, right? They start sending you a couple to try to get a sense for what you can or can't do and try to feel you out a little bit.
Everyone's favorite, the experimental deals. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, they're going to look like this? No. But no, we got to develop those relationships slowly, encourage more deal flow. Eventually, you learn by talking about each deal and what your appetite looks like. So that's why I encourage them to just call me to talk about it. Don't send me a whole lot of stuff. You can if you want to, but let's call and talk about it.
Yeah.
And if it fits, then let's figure what we can do to see if we can move it forward.
Okay, that makes sense. So one of the things that we haven't addressed so far, which I know we talked about a little bit the last time we were able to catch up, that unfortunately wasn't recorded, but it was a good conversation. So, but we didn't go into it super heavy, and I'd like to a little bit today if we can, which is the amount that both of us say no, right? And how important that is, not just for lenders, but for the investors that kind of get help down the road, right? Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. I hate saying no, but what lender doesn't? When I worked at a bank for 10 years, they would always send us out to say we're doing loans even though I knew we weren't. It's tough to do that. Again, being on both sides of the fence and what it's like to be a broker, I'd rather you say no, like right away, right? And so we'll say no to two primary reasons, right? One is we just don't have the capital. That's part of the problem with being an artisan, small or funded lender is we don't have bottomless capital, right? And so although we're fairly consistent in the way we make decisions, and bring me a deal that I would do today, I might not do it tomorrow, largely because I have capital constraint, right? But I'll tell them that. I'm not afraid to say I have a capital constraint. You used to be a little worried about that. Now they're going to call me back. But I sort of set the guidelines with my brokers to say, hey, I'm going to tell you no if I have a capital constraint. And once I have capital available, I'll send an email out to you and tell you to bring the deals back in, right? And the other way I'll say no is if the deal just doesn't look good sometimes. And that sometimes gets awkward because we'll often have clients bring in resources to make the deal look better. But sometimes we'll still say no, because if there's not enough margin in it, there's just risk. And when a client, I don't know if they have multiple deals out there, the more deals they have out there, they're going to end up steering resources to the deal that has the greatest reward. So if you have a lot of deals out there and you've taken the one that's thin and it's got risk, yours is going to be most susceptible to failure if there's yours is going to be the first domino if the domino starts to fall, right? And so, and that's sometimes not in alignment with brokers, because brokers, they're trying to close the deal. It's not always, I want to say it's of importance to them, but they also know that if I don't do it, somebody else is probably going to do it. Developers are optimistic by nature. They're going to find a way to do it, whether it doesn't make often absolute sense or not, right? But if you've been in a workout or you've been in a situation that doesn't do well enough times, those are just the last places you ever want to be. I always tell brokers, I'd rather take you to lunch and have you say, told you you should have done that deal, it was a great deal, than have you not call me back because I'm applying a lot of pressure on your client because now I got to collect or I got to deal with something, right?
Yeah.
So I'd rather you tell me I told you I was right than us have something that goes wrong.
I'm so glad you said that, because that has become my favorite phrase in that scenario, which is to say, like, hey, this isn't something we're going to do. I don't think you and your client should do this, but I'd love to be proven wrong. Like, when it goes well, let me know, text me, shoot me an email, whatever, right? I have gotten people that have reached back out to me that've been like, that deal did work.
I have too.
Which is
But that's
honestly, it's a
fine with
great
me.
feeling though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It gives
a
me an
great
opportunity
feeling.
to talk with them too, and our relationship is intact.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what's really important to me, is to have relationships that are intact. A bad deal can destroy a relationship. Doesn't matter whose fault it was. Just
Yeah.
it's
And
a bad feeling.
I've had a number of people that have also referred over clients, even though I didn't work with them originally, because I told them no on a deal that didn't work out.
Yep.
So I've had investors where I'm like, hey, not only are we not going to do this, but I don't think you should either. You're standing to make 10 grand here, but you've got 60 grand invested. And if anything goes wrong, you're losing money. I don't think you should do this. And then 6 months later, I've gotten 2 or 3 investors that have closed. That first guy might not have even done anything else, right? But I've gotten 2 or 3 other people that have actually started to produce business, because the first guy was like, not only did he tell me no, but he told me why I should back out of it. And the tough part is when they have, earnest money in or anything like that. And I've got to be like, look, you're better off losing 5 grand now or 10 grand now than 50 grand 6 months from now, right?
The nice thing is this market, it was tough to do that early on when the market was just hot and everybody had to make offers. But now, fortunately, we're back to, I would say, a healthier market where you can make an offer with it and still keep a 5-day contingency or something to protect your earnest money. That's what I always tell my clients: get the offer tied down, try to get 3, 4, 5, just get any amount of time that you can call me. Let's take a good look at it before your earnest money goes hard. So I do my best to tell clients, structure the deal so your earnest money doesn't go hard if you can. Just give yourself some time.
That's really cool. I haven't been recommending that to people because I've still had the mindset of like, oh, the market's too hot to go in and ask for those kind of contingencies. And I've never thought to do that before. So I'm going to steal that. So this
that's like that was a good old days when the banks were dumping and nobody was buying them. Standard 10-day inspection. There's all sorts of things that would go on during that time. But now, you're right. I mean, 2-3 years ago when you couldn't do that. Offers, you had to make your offer, no contingencies, close right there. And that was awkward. And I would tell clients, then the response is put the smallest earnest money you can down, because you don't know what it's going to happen.
That's a good little.
But no, you can sometimes get the time. Yeah, you can get the time now.
Yeah, I mean that's a good little nugget for those of you guys who haven't been employing that tactic, right? To recommend to investors, hey, the market has shifted a little bit. It's not quite as aggressive. It's not quite as competitive as it was a couple of years ago because so many people are constricted by really high interest rates that don't have, the money down that they need or can't afford those kind of monthly costs. You have greater power in those situations, even though there's not very many properties on the market. And so you might be able to come into situations like that where you can ask for things that in 2020 or 2021 or 2022 you couldn't ask for, or you could ask for it, but you'd be laughed at.
You wouldn't get it, right.
And a lot of investors probably haven't made that adjustment either. Because like I just said, I hadn't made that. That's something from now on, I'm going to be coaching the clients that I talk to.
I mean, the standard
ask for that.
Standard procedure before was give them a decent, give them a decent price. Don't try to knock them down. Have 8 to close fast with no contingencies. Give them a decent price, but ask for time. During that time, you can say, then you kick the tires. This is like any typical buyer, right? You kick, we went and looked and geez, we'll offer you 10 grand less, but we'll close in 5 days. Right. So then you use your way to try to claw back that way if it makes sense. But no, to me, it's kind of back to the good old days in some places. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm gonna have to try to incorporate that now into some of the sales conversations I have and some of the trainings and stuff we do. I really like that. If you can
save a client in earnest money, they're absolutely thrilled because it makes their ability to go make offers greater with greater confidence, right? You just end up writing a lot of pre-approval letters so they can get those offers out, but it's okay.
Hey, if that's the biggest problem we have is we're writing too many pre-approval letters,
that's a good problem.
Not that bad of a day, right?
Yeah.
Hey, so is there anything else you want to cover? Do you feel like we missed?
No, I think people just understanding if you fit in a lender's model, use them. If you fall outside, look for, there are these nuanced lenders out there, and so you get a good broker that can help you find that if you have a little nuance on your deal, put it that way.
Yeah. And remember, ask. So if you're talking to a lender that you work with normally and you're like, hey, I know this isn't a fit for you, but do you know anyone else that would do this? I don't get that question very often. A lot of times I try to volunteer the answer and say, hey,
no, it's a good question. I do the same thing.
Right.
I volunteer. If the deal comes to me, it doesn't fit, I'll send them out because it doesn't, again, that doesn't help the relationship.
But
so that's a good point.
If you're working with a lender who doesn't do that primarily, or you're working with other lenders outside of the two of us that don't just make those recommendations all the time, ask, hey, do you know anyone else that would take a look at this? I've gotten questions all over the place. I've gotten questions about, real estate properties in and outside of the U.S. I got a question 3 or so years ago about a CBD vending machine, and we found a guy who would finance it. So don't send me CBD vending machines, but all kinds of crazy stuff. Like sometimes the stars just align, and you ran into someone at an event or a conference 2 weeks ago that does weird stuff, and you're like, actually, I can introduce you to.
That's a good point. Always ask. There's always a link on the chain. Just got to remind yourself of that. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you don't ask, the answer is no. And if the answer is no, that's okay, right?
No's okay.
So there's nothing else you take away from this. I hope that's been helpful. If this has been helpful, let us know, and we can do more stuff like it. Charles, I appreciate the time. It's been great, and it's been helpful for me. Like I said, I'm going to have to incorporate the little piece about the earnest money now when I talk to clients.
Well, I appreciate the meeting and discussion. I really enjoy talking to other lenders. It helps me understand what's going on in our vast universe out there now.
Yeah, and if there's ever anything I can do to help, you know where to find me. Let me know, all right?
Sounds great.
Appreciate the time.
Okay, thanks.